Welcome to 5-Star CX, the podcast where customer-centric leadership comes to life. Each episode, we explore the minds of those who excel at putting the customer first and offering a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to lead with empathy and innovation. I'm your host, Billy, and in our inaugural episode, we are speaking with Mila Suthakar. Mila is a client experience leader, mental health advocate, and DEI champion. She is currently the Director of Customer Channels Excellence at Wave. And in our conversation, we talk about the proliferation of AI, how companies can leverage customer data more efficiently, the rapidly changing environment of the customer journey, and what innovations are coming next. If you like this conversation, consider subscribing. Now, please enjoy my conversation with Mila. Mila, could you share with us a little bit about your journey in becoming a leader in the customer experience field? Maybe you can share some of the roles that you've held and that ultimately led you to your position at Wave.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career off with about 6 years in retail. I worked at a large retail chain in Australia. Then I moved to London, England in about 2008. I actually worked as a collections agent for a wine distributor, where I was calling sommeliers at like England's Michelin-starred restaurants, like the Fat Duck, which is like Hess and Blumenthal's restaurant. I went back to Australia in 2009, spent even more years working as a collections agent at a host of different multinational organizations, anything from asset finance to grocery as well. And then I moved to Canada in 2013, went back into collections again. But my career started taking off when I joined a company called Spin Master, who, if you know Paw Patrol, they do Paw Patrol. And I became a team lead of credit and collections. That was my first leadership role, and I was not great at it at all. But eventually I was looking for more. I made the leap to a company called Ecobee in Toronto as a revenue manager. And again, looking for more, but I realized that finance isn't really where I wanted to end up. I was there for about a year, but it was super transformative. Like, really got to learn like agile and tech in a different way. Got really, really into it. Ultimately, though, I was interested in finding out whether my collections experience translated well to customer service. That was the leap for me. Was I'm having all these conversations that are slightly negative about how to pay back loans. Wanted to understand how to do that differently. I landed a company called PayBright in 2019, where I was the director of operations. That ended up being buy now, pay later within Canada, and it was super, super nascent at the time. But we really got to explore customer service and customer experience in a different way. It's my first time using Zendesk as an example. Then finally, I moved to Wealthsimple, which is a Toronto-based fintech, as their director of client experience, and I'm now at Wave as the director of customer channels excellence. And I'm returning to my roots a little bit with systems, platforms, and data, and that's where I'm particularly interested in the development of AI within the client-facing space.
So you've always been in like a customer-facing role. What is it about customer-facing positions that ultimately inspired you to make that your career path?
You're right. I've always been customer facing. I love to talk and I like to problem solve. And I think those are really, really key places for me to really experience and understand where I like to play. I always said people used to scrunch their faces at me when I said I worked in collections. Like, it was always like, oh. But what people don't really understand is that collection is all about problem solving and negotiation specifically. If you push too hard, you might not get paid. If you don't do enough and don't give a fulsome response, that's also going to delay payment. So it's about being really specific. But I always say I'm lazy enough to fix or automate something, right? So that's where I first got to play. Like, back in the day, it was, how do I do an email mail merge out of Microsoft Outlook? Like, that was the automation level that I was trying to do. But I think it really sparked my excitement to problem solve for a customer. I think that's a place where you can see the impact of your work in a much faster way. Like, you can take one conversation and change that person's day or their experience with you, and all it takes is one conversation. So it's really important to me, and that passion for really solving a customer's problem has been a thread throughout my career, no matter where I've worked or how. That's been a really big thread. I think just really kind of focusing on that in my career is what has led me to customer experience, and I don't think I'll look back now.
You mentioned that your first leadership role, you said you were not that great. I remember my first leadership role, and boy, if I could go back, there's a bajillion things we could do. But I think that's a part of leadership where, you can read all the leadership books in the world, but it's such a boots on the ground, hands on. You kind of figure it out as you go. Can you talk a little bit about your first leadership experience and what you've learned from there?
Oh my gosh, I did everything wrong, like just trying to solve all the problems myself, like trying to step in, like trying to protect people, protect my reputation by controlling the team. Um, I think as I've moved through different leadership roles, the power of letting something burn and coaching instead has taken priority, right? Like I think when you try and fix or solve something for your team, you're actually saying like, I don't want to teach you how to do it. But that's actually where coaching becomes a really big thing for a leader, because you get there by being good at your job for sure, but to actually be a leader is to coach and help other people get there too, right? So if I come in and fix every problem, which is what I was doing in that first role, it kind of becomes this like you're just like a misfix it for everything, as opposed to being a leader, right? And I think that's the switch in my career to moving from I'm here to represent myself as a leader, as opposed to I'm leading through my people and how do I make them successful being the outcome. I think that's the flip that changed things for me.
I love the mentality of sometimes you just have to let it burn, because it's so true. I feel like the best leaders are the ones who are okay, or who I should say, who deploy curiosity with their team and to figure out what makes each person tick individually, and how to empower them to be their best version of themselves. And we could probably do a whole podcast on leadership. I do have one more fun question along those lines that I know is a topic that's an interest of yours. But what I want to do is actually I want to talk about Wave for a moment. Wave is a financial services software company for small businesses. I really like on the company LinkedIn profile that you all are, and I'll quote, unwavering in our commitment to grow and support both our customers and our people. I love that mission statement. Can you share a little bit about the company and how you prioritize customer centricity?
Yeah. So Wave offers a simple one-stop money management tool that empowers small business owners to start, survive, and thrive. Our tools are purpose-built for micro businesses, so we're not going into that full enterprise spaces yet, but these micro businesses are traditionally underserved by the traditional financial sector. Um, what we're aiming to do, though, is to remove the complexity surrounding the back end tasks that take up a lot of the entrepreneur's time. So, specifically, that's like sending invoices, balancing their books, and staying tax ready. That's the primary focus for us. A lot of small business owners did not get into their business to try and do all that financial stuff. They had something that they were really interested by, and that's what they wanted to do the work, and they wanted to get paid and or support that business. Now, I don't think they're all accountants, and that's where we can step in and try and make that portion of their role a little bit easier so that they can really focus on doing what they love. Um, and that's how we have to stay customer obsessed, right? Like we have to be able to solve those problems for our customers, and we are hyper focused on making a difference in a small business owner's life. And we're excited to bring that value to small business owners in a new and different way. Like we're going through a bit of changes in the organization, and that is to specifically help customers survive and thrive as a small business.
It seems like change is kind of the only constant in business nowadays, especially with, and this is one of the topics that I really wanted to talk to you about is um, AI. The proliferation of AI has been, in my opinion, nothing short of astounding. Um, you know, I don't even know where to begin. It's changing every facet of every function in every industry, and I think in ways that I don't think a lot of people quite understand yet. I think it's really hard, when someone says, "Hey, where do you think things are going to be in 10 years?" I don't think anybody meaningfully can answer that and say it with true confidence. Especially in the customer service, customer experience realm. Customer service has become a 24/7, always on function. How do you think companies should think about adopting AI efficiently without, one, interrupting productivity, but also without losing the human touch that I think that makes customer support so special?
This is a really good question. My approach is that AI should make your customer support team better, not replace them. I think when you're looking to sort of replace human support entirely, I mean, that just makes me think like no one has, really looked at it. Like a phone tree of despair is what I'll call it. Like if you get stuck in that loop and you're like pressing four and it's like not getting to the person that you want to, like that's technology working at its poorest, right? And like that can also happen with AI if you use it ineffectively. What are you actually going to get out of it? And I think for CX teams specifically, I think there's an opportunity to use technology to augment support. Like that's always been the case for CX teams. I think it would be inappropriate for me to suggest that a human touch is not impactful. Like I think humans like talking to humans, right? But do they have to talk to humans for the simplest of things, or can we use technology to augment that? Can we make it easier for an agent? Maybe it's like creating a response that you can personalize, that your agent can personalize, because that's the human touch. Like, how do you make it easy for your agent to personalize and use AI to do that and make it easier? That's the productivity gain. Like, for a lot of CX teams, like if you ask a CX agent, a lot of the time they'll say things like, I had to read the last 10 tickets to understand what the customer is talking about or what their experience has been. Now, if you can get AI to give you a summary of the customer's last 30 days of interactions, what does that do for your agent? Does it allow them to get a more fulsome answer with contextual information to the customer faster? Success. Like, that's actually what you want to do. Now, if you're trying to replace the whole conversation, a lot can break. To your point, the technology is so nascent and like it's changed from last year. Even like this is changing really, really rapidly. And I think a lot of the time the focus is on reducing costs, and I completely understand that. But I think there's a lot of conversation going on in CX as well about using a support team as a revenue driver, as opposed to just a traditional contact center with a cost center attached to it. And I think companies are going through this change over time, but I truly believe that support is a differentiator, especially if you're in a SaaS product. And I think making sure that you can use AI to leverage what you already have as data and make it easier for the human to respond at speed and personalize a response, that's actually where I think it can be really impactful. And I think there's a lot of work, and I think a lot of people are trying to do this, and sometimes I hear, I once heard an AI vendor say that chatbot CSAT will never be as good as human CSAT. And part of me goes, do you not trust your technology? Like that shouldn't be the bar, right? Like the bar should be it's as good as, or it can help to affect a better CSAT out of your agents who are doing the work as well. But it's an interesting place to be. Like I think it's easy to say it will replace humans, but at what cost, right? Like if we've primarily been solving for CSAT for so long, and now we're saying AI might not be as good as, why would it be a replacement, right? Like, so to me, it's more about augmenting than replacing, and finding the efficiency while you can still provide hyper personalized specific responses with a human touch that will really boost that loyalty with your customer as well.
I love that perspective because I think a lot of employees in a lot of different companies who are genuinely nervous about, what AI is going to do. I mean, it's only been a year and a half since GPT stormed into the world, and we're actually recording this the day after GPT 4.0 was announced, and so we're all still just kind of wrapping our minds around what this can do for us and what might it do on the negative. But I love your perspective about the augmentation piece to it, because that's actually kind of the camp that I'm in as well. I'm interested to get your take on this. My perspective is, yes, AI is going to take some of that monotonous kind of first layer tasks, and that's going to allow the human agent to take some of the more complex issues, some of the escalations. And in order to be good at that, you have to deploy empathy. And I think what's interesting about that is if you are being more empathetic on a day-to-day basis, you're going to understand your customer even more, but you're also going to take that to your day-to-day kind of human existence, your day-to-day life. And I think AI has an opportunity to actually, in a way, create a more empathetic world. Do you agree with that? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's about how you deploy it, right? Like, so if I go back to this idea that like some companies will think like a chatbot should replace or deflect volume, right? That's one way to look at it. But I think to your point, it doesn't put the empathy in front of the customer at all. Now, if we were doing instead more like human in the loop stuff, where it's like you've got that human that can do the empathy, it's like I don't think we're there yet with AI. Like I don't know that AI has a lot of empathy right now, just as yet. But that's where human in the loop technology can be really helpful. It's like the technology can get you the automation. That's actually what you leverage the AI for, and human in the loop can bring you that empathy in a different way. And I think the more we sort of allow people to talk to humans, but to do the more complex things and really leverage the human touch and the complexity, as opposed to like, do you need a human to help you reset your password? I think the answer is no. Like, you should make it so easy to do this little repeatable task that's a very commonplace. Don't try and do it through AI, because it's not going to give you the empathy. It's not going to understand like why you might have forgotten your password, as an example, or like doesn't give you any agency, right? Like the fact that you even have to call someone or talk to someone to get that done reduces that empathy, and it kind of makes, kind of makes it feel a little strange. But I think where those complex conversations come in, like for our business, if I want to talk about a chart of accounts, that's not something AI can do really well. Like, it needs to understand a little bit more about your business. Now, I could get a satisfactory base answer from AI to help, and then the human can do the empathy piece as well. But that's where I think the AI could be leveraged really well, is like the part that we don't want to spend time thinking about, that's the AI. Now, the empathy, it's like, yes, that'll come over time. And I think as the technology improves and becomes less nascent, I think you're going to get that empathy piece, but I don't think there's enough data yet to train that. But I think the opportunity exists, and it's one that we should aim to solve for eventually with AI as well. But it's really about how do you make sure, because of that risk piece as well, that you have someone looking over it. Because what I wouldn't want to happen is, I don't want my experience, well, my customer experience, and my team's customer experience, I don't want that to be impacted by AI doing the wrong thing. And that's where I think there is a lot of benefit in having that be like a mutual process over the next couple of years, while we try and figure out how good AI can actually be.
Yeah, it seems like empathy and creativity is, that is the kind of foundation of what it means to be human. I find it hard to believe that an AI is gonna take that over and be better than us anytime soon. You mentioned data. I think companies can leverage data in a more efficient and maybe a more creative way. How do you think companies should leverage data to inform their CX strategies?
Yeah. There's a weird type of chaos that comes through when everyone's just raising like anecdotal feedback in whatever customer feedback channel you've created in Slack. Like, it's just insane, right? Like, you end up kind of just having like an N of one constantly, instead of really trend data. And I can guarantee you, is there's nothing that annoys your product and engineering teams more than anecdotal singular feedback with no impact or trend data available. So I think, partially I also think that you cannot improve something that you don't measure effectively too. So I think data is incredibly important to CX teams. But just having the data isn't enough. You really need to be able to leverage all available data points. So whether it's CSAT app reviews, Google Trustpilot reviews, like call data, ticket data, you kind of need something that's going to span the breadth of everything you have. So you don't bias the data, but also how else do I provide a fulsome view of what's happening to tickets and what that's driving? I think there's a direct correlation. Well, let me phrase it this way. I believe a CX team sits in between the MVP and what the customer wants, right? Like that's where CX exists. It's in that space. If I can't articulate what that thing is that's driving the volume between the MVP and the end product that the customer is actually expecting, that's where the data comes in. I need to be able to say like 20% of my tickets were driven by X thing that was built last Thursday, and we never saw that before. Like that is the granularity level that you actually need. Because the anecdotal data doesn't really do anything. It doesn't. It's not as impactful as you want it to be. But I think also, there's just like a number of ways to look at data as well, especially in CX. So let's say your chatbot CSAT is really low. You could say that's just because chatbots are really crappy and they don't work well. That's one available thing to you. But what's actually driving that? Like, is it that your pathing is super complex? Is it that you're not allowing to get through to an agent really quickly? Are you preventing the customer from getting through to a live agent? That could be why your CSAT is low. Now, if I just look at the CSAT objectively without understanding what's actually driving that, I can make up a couple of excuses or reasons for that CSAT to be low. But I think that's where the gap is, and that's where data can be really helpful. Could be more dependent on other things, like partially what you're driving to make that CSAT low, or it could be product feedback. But analyzing your CSAT, and I don't just mean the number, I'm talking about the verbatims as well, and trying to use AI, frankly, to get a sentiment as an example and trying to understand that, that's actually where it can be really impactful. And I think CX teams really need to lean into that data. And I think that's where you get impact and share that with the rest of the company to eventually reduce your volume as well, which is kind of a lot of the time where CX teams are headed, is like, how do I get less tickets through to my team so that we can focus on other things? Like that's like number one complaint all the time. It's like, how do we reduce the ticket drivers, and how do we figure out how to share those ticket driver information with other teams to be able to help us not have to deal with the same problem over and over again?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. With the piece of the complexity, the over complexity of the customer journey, the customer journey is something that I've always been fascinated of. I think, especially today in kind of the self-paced buyer's journey, there's no one size fits all, and it doesn't matter if it's your competitors or a different industry. Like it's so individual to your company. And the customer journey is something that all functions of a business should focus on. And I think a lot of people focus on the customer facing roles, focusing on the customer journey and not so much the non-customer facing roles. And I think that a lot of companies kind of miss the mark there, especially with the excess of data that companies can leverage. How do you think about making improvements to their customer journey?
I mean, and I've experienced this probably at every company that I've worked at, right? Like sometimes personal judgment and personal prioritization get in the way of prioritizing improvements to the customer journey specifically. Sometimes the hardest thing to do, or the most boring thing to fix, is actually something that improves the customer journey. It's not necessarily the thing that's like the best selling point necessarily, or the next new feature that you think is going to drive profit, but sometimes just fixing that annoying thing for a customer is actually what's needed. So what I think is interesting is CX teams handle incredible volume of customer feedback. It's the primary channel. Like, we're the face of a business. Your CX team is the face of your business. That's who is talking to the customer the most, is your CX team. I think being able to leverage that data to really drive what you need to build or fix for the customer, that's the connective tissue in my mind. It is the thing that drives prioritization if done well. If we say, I don't put that over there. That's the customer journey that CX needs to deal with. I mean, there are like really wonderful gold nuggets of feedback that come through from customers. And I say this knowing that not everyone will share that feedback with you as well. Like, think about how many times you actually respond to a CSAT survey. Like, actually, like, I don't do it every time. Now, if a customer is telling me something, it means they care enough to tell me. So I want to share that with the product team, and I want to do that with data and leverage that to share how many times it's been done so that we can improve the customer journey. Someone I spoke to recently said customer support should be the exception, not the rule. And I really like that phrasing, because the idea is if you have to let your CX team deal with it, it's something that you're not addressing for the customer. And I think that's where that gap exists. Remember how I was saying, like, we're in between the MVP and what the customer wants? That's all that data right there. And if you treat it like customer support has to happen, step in, it's like, there's something that we're missing here, because that's the feedback that we're hearing, and we want to share that with teams so that they can make it easier for the customer. Like, one of the things that I find really impactful is, like, if you ask most CX agents, specialists, heroes, however you want to refer to your frontline team, if you ask them why they get into customer support, it's because they usually say it's because I want to help people. And that frustration can show if you're helping people with the same thing month in, month out, month in, month out. Sometimes I'll see something as a ticket driver for like over a year. That frustration can come out in your customer interactions as well. Now, if you address that with your support team and say, well, that's like the number one thing that customers have talked about, they're going to feel like they can help the customer in a different way if they have solutions, or if they can say things like, you know what, we've heard that feedback, we're going to prioritize that, or we know we're prioritizing that, and we're hoping to release that in 6 months. That solves that problem of not being able to help your customer, which is actually a driving force of why they come to join anyway or start off in CX, right? They really want to learn, they really want to help the customer. And I think listening to customer feedback is super important, and then being able to connect that feedback back to your product and eng team so that they know what the customer's perspective is as well. That's like the golden success area for me.
I couldn't agree more, and we could probably do an entire podcast on the customer journey, and so we'll do that on our next conversation. But I could not agree more. So we've talked about AI, data, the customer journey, and that's all kind of regarding what's happening now. It's funny, we just talked about how no one knows what's going on in the next 5 to 10 years, but I'm gonna put you in the hot seat. What emerging trends do you foresee having the biggest impact on customer experience within the next, let's go, few years? And how should companies adapt? Because it seems like adaption is kind of the name of the game, but how do they actually do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think generative AI is coming for your chatbot, man. I think it's not about pathing and keywords anymore. It's about contextual understanding and conversational AI. I think, I'm a fan of any technology that keeps a human agent in the driver's seat, because the industry is changing so quickly, and it's going to be challenging to rewind. Like, I don't know if this made it to you, but there was recently like an Air Canada case where they were trying to say, like, they're not responsible for the customer experience when a chatbot responded with incorrect information, and
I heard
that's
that,
kind of
yeah.
like, yeah, that's kind of like the worst possible experience for me. It's like being able to blame the AI instead of like getting a human to help. Right? And I think what's really interesting about this is I hear a lot of the time that, like, people refer to CX teams as like frontline jobs, right? Frontline or junior. And, I think there's sometimes this ease of an agent to fall into like, hey, CX is a dead end job. Like, I hear this so much. And I think actually, with the advent of AI, the dead end part of the job is getting automated. And that actually allows your agent to step up into solving customer problems at a really high level and getting into really complex problem solving, which is not what they've been traditionally asked to do. And I think that's the pivot here. And that's where the trend is headed, is you actually put your humans in front of the most complex stuff, not just have them around to answer the phone, right? Like that's the difference. It used to be like lots of people are calling. How do you get them to answer the phone? And like you optimize for all these like operational metrics that are like, how fast can you answer? How quickly can you get the person off the phone? Like, what is all this like metric? But what if we actually thought about it in a different way and said, like, did we solve your problem today? And how quickly did we solve your problem? Like, did we back and forth multiple times to get there? That's in the old world where it's like, just get it off your plate really quickly. Just answer the first question and keep going. I think there's a lot more changing in the industry as it relates to CX professionals. And I do think it's turning into a less frontline, more problem solving. And I think that's, if you optimize for that in the future, I think you're going to get a different kind of client experience. And I think your team is going to love you too, because it's less of a dead end job and more of like a really complex problem solving role that can be really impactful to business prioritization of features and fixes, which is not traditionally how they've been pitched in customer service roles.
I absolutely love that answer because the undertone of that is, look, regardless of what technology is coming up, keep the human touch. Keep the human touch, because that truly is what makes customer experience so important, and especially the problem solving aspect. You're exactly right. CX agents, they're not people just to answer phones, they're problem solvers. I love that perspective. I've got two more questions for you. I greatly appreciate your time. The first topic I know is near and dear to your heart. You are a big mental health, DEI coaching and mentoring advocate. I remember the first time that I started working in teams, kind of in the corporate space, and to be perfectly frank, my first few positions, I just never felt comfortable in them. I always was worried about if I was doing enough to keep my job. And as I got into a more of a leadership role, I learned the vocabulary phrase psychological safety. And I think that's also, we talked about leadership earlier, about what makes a great leader. I think providing psychological safety is so important to do, because that's ultimately that calmness of knowing, like, hey, I'm a part of this team. That's gonna be the engine that allows them to feel empowered to do their life's best work. But with that said, can you talk about the importance of psychological safety in the workplace, and how do you bring that advocacy to Wave?
I'm so glad you asked this question, because I think it's something that a lot of CX leaders think about, because we do often have teams that skew younger, or you're leading folks in their first ever corporate job, like you were talking about. So I'm a firm believer that innovation only comes when you create healthy tension in the workplace, or a space where anyone can challenge the status quo, or go the extra mile, or stand by their own opinions. So you need to build a team that is resilient to being challenged on their own opinions, and ones that are so confident that they are right because they've done the research and utilize the data to know that they're right. Like, that's the healthy tension that I'm thinking about, where it's like, I am confident enough to speak about my truth and I have data to back that up. So to your point, that's why psychological safety actually becomes really important, not only for your team, but also for innovation, right? Like, they need to be safe enough to say the thing that's different and be able to handle, what about XYZ, or like some challenge to that, because it really allows you to get that one person on the edge case who's innovating to speak up, right? I think it's important that we foster that culture even at the start. Like, I think there's something really cool about innovation and being able to do something new, different, challenging, and it takes the ability for someone to take a risk without feeling that they're going to get hauled over the coals if they make a mistake as well. And you have to like foster that culture. I'm going to tell you a story here. When I was the first team that I ever had in CX, I was given the keys to Zendesk. We'd purchased the contract beforehand, and I had a team of just really, really new folks who none of us had ever worked with Zendesk before. We didn't know anything. We didn't have enough to even pay for the professional services to help get it set up. So we learned everything from like their help center and like how to set it up. That was how we built our full Zendesk instance. So I had a team member that was working on a Sunday. and they fixed one of the triggers in Zendesk while they were working and auto closed 16,000 tickets that we had in our backlog. So why do I tell you this story? It wasn't a big deal. It really wasn't. Now, a good leader will allow for that kind of mistake to happen. You could say, I'm going to hold this person over the coals. Like, what are we going to do with this 16K tickets? The reality is we just reversed it with an opposite trigger and like reopened all the tickets. Very easy solve. But the thing that I was really kind of curious about there is like, this is a person who's working late at night, trying to do something for the company, made a little error. The coaching in me says, thank you so much for giving up your Sunday to work on a business problem. However, let's talk about how being tired can impact the work that you do, because you might not be as detail oriented, right? So remember I was talking before about letting the fire burn a little bit? What's interesting is first leadership job, I would have been like, oh my gosh, how is this going to impact me? Like, what does this do for me? Like, how does this make me look towards the leadership team? What am I going to do, right? Now I'm like, I got you. I'm going to talk to leadership and say, you were working on a Sunday and you were trying really hard to do something good for the company. And I'm okay that you made the mistake. It's reversible. We'll fix this. That is part of being inside of a psychologically safe environment. If I nitpick every mistake that's happening, not good. Am I going to hold senior leaders more accountable to the frontline agent? Absolutely, right? Because it's a different leadership opportunity. But like understanding that is a space that you kind of need to allow to happen, where it's like, make the mistake, I get it, but like it's fixable, it's reversible. You're giving people agency. You're giving them work that makes them excited. They're testing, they're playing, like they're doing things in good faith, right? Like that's kind of the environment that you want to foster there, because I think having a space where you can take risks, learn, fail a little bit, and end up having a really great experience out of it, actually, that's the win, right? Like the most positive outcome of that was that same team, 3 people, never used Zendesk before. They also set up a help center in like a week and a half. Like that's the kind of speed that you're going to get if you allow them to take those risks as well. And like the good comes with the bad, and like being able to provide that safe space where they can make mistakes, but also do some of that innovative stuff within that environment, it's better for everyone. It really is.
Mila, I've got one final question for you. Being that this podcast is called 5-Star CX, because we all know that getting 5 stars is so important to us. Why is a 5-star experience so important to you and Wave? And what advice would you give other leaders looking to improve their own customer experience?
Yeah. I firmly believe that excellent customer experience or service is better than any marketing that you could do for your company. Word of mouth is always going to be a really good strategy. Reviews are like the social media equivalent of word of mouth, right? Like instead of asking a friend now, you're going to go and research them on whatever website that has a 5-star review component to it. You're going to go do that research instead of just trying out the company first. I think it's important to understand that I am certain that your product leadership always wants your product to be easy to use, navigate, just works like without any help required. But customers will eventually call your CX team. It's impossible to suggest that nobody will talk to your CX team at all, or that you don't need a support team. But when you do call that support team or speak to them or email them, you don't want to be on hold for 3 hours. You don't want to talk to a robot that can't understand you. You have to try and get it right. And the only advice that I really have for folks is listen to your customers, listen to what they're telling you. Don't undervalue or devalue the feedback that comes through your customer service team, and take immediate action. Don't sit on it. Take the smallest thing and try and impact what you do and what you're building. And I think what's really cool for CX teams is we have that feedback. We can do something about it. It's in our control. You can change that flow. You can make the path easier. You don't need to put people through 1,000 different routing tools. Just get it to where it needs to be really quickly, and have your most experienced person work on that. They can answer it really quickly. I think there's nothing else more important than your customers to your business. Without them, what are you building anything for? Listen to them. They're the ones buying your product.
Beautiful. Mila, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
I'm so glad I got that last one in.
Awesome.
I wrote it down. How'd that go? Is that good?
It was perfect. Yeah, let me
Great.
cut us. I'd like to thank Mila for being our inaugural guest. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next episode of 5 Star CX. Take care.